Investing and caring for whatever is between you and the ground is always important, and for most people, their feet are the first thing between them and the ground, and it's always worth looking after your feet. Many divers quickly develop foot care routines before and after dives to keep their feet in good working order. Hi all of you awesome scuba divers out there, welcome to the Scuba Diving Magazine channel, your favourite place for the latest scuba diving news and gear reviews. Today we're talking about feet. Some people really don't like feet and others seem to like them a little bit too much, but it is important to look after your feet because finning, of course, relies on your feet being in good condition, and there are a few things that you should be doing to look after your feet before, during and after a dive. Scuba.com is your one-stop portal to everything scuba diving. They are not just another online dive store, they are your passionate diving companion ready to guide you on this incredible journey. Whether you're a complete novice or a seasoned diver, Scuba.com caters to every level. Scuba.com is your ultimate diving buddy. You can browse their extensive selection of top quality scuba gear on their website, from masks and fins to BCDs and regulators, all meticulously chosen by their team of diving experts. Find the latest dive computers, underwater cameras and diving suits to capture every moment of your aquatic adventures. If you're planning your next dive trip, then Scuba.com streamlines that process also. Search through an extensive database of dive resorts, liveaboards and dive sites catering to various budgets and interests. Read reviews from fellow divers, compare dive packages and book your dream dive vacation with just a few clicks. Scuba.com isn't just about equipment and destinations, they are a vibrant community where you can connect with fellow divers in the area, share experiences, swap travel tips and learn from seasoned professionals with their dive club. Visit scuba.com today and unlock a world of underwater wonder. Right, there are a few things that you need to do before you start your dive. The first thing is to not hurt your feet in the lead up to a trip. I know it sounds stupid, but I've done this a few times by stubbing my toe on a rock, splitting my toe open. That sucked. And standing on a rusty nail as well, that went straight through my shoe. That also sucked. Not on the same trip, that would have been awful, but it was the same foot thinking about it. But anyway, I promise you that a hole in your foot will really take your attention away from the beautiful underwater world. It's kind of fine to begin with and you think, hey, this isn't so bad, but after about 10-20 minutes of like continual finning in salt water, yeah, you find it. A good friend of mine also dropped some lead weight on one of his toes right before a dive. There wasn't much that we could do at the time, but yeah, just those kind of things, whatever it is, be extra careful to like look where you're going, look at the floor, especially when you're like barefoot or just in like flip-flops or something, and like where you're putting your foot down, things that are going over your feet in like the week or so leading up to a dive trip. Just be extra careful around your feet. Before every dive, my first instinct is to shake out and feel on the inside of my dive boots. Another old buddy of mine crushed a spider whilst donning his boots once on a dive, and ever since then I've shaken out my boots and like cautiously felt inside for any kind of hitchhikers that might be calling my boots home. Spiders are fairly rare on dive boats, so don't worry too much about it, but it is a good routine to get into, but I'm also feeling for like sand and grit that may have found its way inside my boot. If you really want to ruin the dive, leave a piece of grit in your dive boot that you really can't reach on the dive. That rubs your wet skin with every single fin kick. Feel inside and wash and clean out any sand or grit that may have found its way inside of your boot so it's nice and smooth inside. A dive mat is a really great addition to your kit bag, especially if you dive from the shore. Lay it out, and you need to be very strict with your dive gear mat and have like separate footwear for on the mat and off the mat. The mat is your clean zone, and you need to beat anybody with a stick who steps on it with dirty shoes. Step out of your dirty shoes and then step into your clean zone. It's helpful to have shoes that you can slip in and out from as your like dirty shoes. That's why you'll find some divers with Crocs. It's not for any sort of fashion sense, believe me. And also place your mat near a bench or somewhere where you can sit down to put your boots on. There's no point putting it out in the middle of nowhere because you're going to have to walk to it. It's far easier if you can sit down and like brush your feet clean, put your boots on all in one place. Brush your feet. Feel for any like sand or grit like between your toes, around your ankles, your heels and everything. Once both feet are really nice and clean and your hands are clean as well, then you can put your boots on. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of zippered boots. I do see their benefits to get them on nice and easily, but they do tend to like unzip by the end of the dive. That's why you find Velcro tabs on some boots to prevent the zipper from undoing. But if you do have zippered boots and you do find that they rub either from like the zipper itself or an internal seam, sometimes the stitching can be enough, then try to preempt that. There's no reason why you can't wear just socks like a normal shoe. So many divers just seem to forget that socks exist when they go scuba diving, and they can make a huge difference for rubbing dive boots or like full foot fins that are just a little bit too large and just rub a bit whilst you're finning. When you're donning your fins, don't yank on them too tight or too loose, neither. There's a very fine line between too tight and too loose. A loose fin is going to wobble and it's just going to rub in one or two particular areas. The fin should fit onto your boot or your foot with little to no wiggle and like move with your foot. If your foot moves around inside of it, it's probably too large. If you need to, the opposite, you need to jam your foot into the foot pocket though, then the fin is too small. It will probably work, but you're more likely to get cramp because the fin is going to pivot in the wrong place in the middle of your foot, and they'll be very hard to get off at the end of the dive because the neoprene of your dive boot is going to compress during the dive because of the pressure. It's then going to sink further into the foot pocket during the dive, and then as you ascend it's going to start expanding and it's going to squeeze and hold itself in place. Now that's going to be tough to pull off at the end of the dive, so do make sure that you have the right size boots and fins before the dive. Pull the straps taut or set up the springs, most of the springs nowadays, so that your fin stays in place with minimal tension in the strap. You basically want them to be tight enough to hold your fin from falling off, but that's kind of about it. Too much tension and it can cut off blood flow and it can rub. You also don't want anything tight around your ankles or your calves. So if you have a wetsuit with really tight ankle cuffs or a dry suit with gaiters that you put on to prevent air from rushing down to your boot, be careful of that because if they are too tight, they can cut off blood flow to your feet, which is obviously bad. You need to keep things like skin tight to prevent water from flushing in and out, that kind of stuff, but not so tight that it cuts off blood flow. Dry your feet and clean your boots, and also clean your feet and dry your boots as well. But spend some time looking over your feet after the dive, looking for any kind of sores or swelling. There is a condition called fin foot, which Dan describes as a hyperemic condition in which feet become sore and swollen after a dive. If your boots and fins are a bit too tight, or you're diving in colder waters where like the blood and fluids start to retreat from your extremities to your core, removing your boots after that dive causes the blood vessels to dilate because you're starting to warm up again, and all of the fluids are going to rush back to your feet, causing them to swell and quite often become uncomfortable, either through like numbness or tingling. Fin foot alone is not generally associated with decompression sickness though. Some divers will feel that discomfort or numbness in their feet, start to worry that it's decompression sickness in their extremities, when depending on the circumstances, it's more likely than it might just be fin foot. Mention it to your dive team. My feet are tingling and swollen, and monitor those symptoms just in case. Take a lay down, use a warm compress and keep the feet elevated. That's going to help to relieve the pain, because the fluids will start to drift back to your core instead of collecting in your feet. If swelling persists for more than 48 hours, contact your physician. If you do have any other signs of symptoms or of DCS, then of course escalate it sooner. Itchy skin, all those kind of things. If it's just your feet, swollen feet, then it's probably fin foot, but it's always worth mentioning it to someone else. Treat any sores and keep them clean with antiseptics. Wet skin is very fragile, and repeated movements in the water can rub that same spot and it can end up breaking the skin. Diving has a knack of keeping sores open because the water prevents scabs from forming properly, and they can then become infected, and it can scar more easily because you're continually getting it wet and it's not healing properly. Let them dry and keep them clean as much as possible. Fungus also loves dive gear, especially dive boots and dive decks. So to help prevent athlete's foot, dry your feet thoroughly and clean them as soon as you can, especially between your toes. Don't rub too roughly for a little while after the dive whilst your skin is still soft. Start by dabbing it with a clean towel. Try not to use the same towel over and over again without cleaning it, because the towel itself can then have the fungus. So yeah, just try to keep everything clean and dry as well as you can. Swap to clean and dry footwear as soon as you can to avoid walking around in communal areas barefoot and picking something up that another diver has cultivated. The same with your dive boots. Dry them off and keep them clean. The inside of your dive boots is a prime spot for fungus because it's a dark, damp place. So prop them upside down and somewhere with a decent breeze to try and air out the inside. After your dive trip, you don't really want to do it between dives, between every single dive, but after the entire dive trip, give them a good wash with some antifungal detergent, and of course dry them thoroughly before storing them away. The main takeaways are really to keep your feet and your boots clean and dry. Your main enemies are going to be grit, fungus and poorly fitted gear. Invest in gear that is the correct size. Too small and it's going to cut off blood flow. Too large and it's going to rub and create sores. If you do need some new dive gear, then remember to check out scuba.com. They have a full range of diving equipment in all sizes, and scuba.com has a pressure-free fit guarantee where they'll actually arrange the return of your item if it doesn't fit, and then bring you another size that should fit you better without any additional shipping costs. And at scuba.com, they'll just keep going backwards and forwards with their shells until you are completely satisfied and perfectly comfortable. They do want to make sure that you get the right, correctly fitted equipment, and you're not worried about return shipping costs or anything. That's all on them. If you have any other tips or tricks to look after your feet after a dive, or even before a dive or during a dive, then pop them down in the comments below. And remember to check out our website and our magazine for more diving news and advice. And of course, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube if you're new here. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.